who knew that the cure to the Dagestani wrestling were the Aussies?
With the Aussies? Okay, let's go there. Your friend, your training partner, Alexander Volkanovski, you helped him prepare for the Islam Makhachev versus Volkanovski fight. Who do you think, first of all, won that fight?
That's a tricky one.
How is that the tricky question?
I will say when I was
the shit talk you've been doing, how is that the tricky question? Right.
When I was in the corner going into the fifth, I personally believed live that Volkanovski probably needed a finish to take the victory.
But you have to think that way, right? In general, or you like legitimately?
It's a gray area because the judging, who knows? Plus, I was like, wait, we're in Australia. Where's this bias? You know, we've got some Australian judges here. Yeah. I was really hoping we get a bit of bias on that. Yeah. Unfortunately not. Hopefully they lose their jobs. But again, yeah, it was a close fight. I think sometimes you're blinded in the moment because, again, everyone counted Volkanovski out. The crowd's behind him. So everything he does is going to get a huge cheer. You're biased towards the smaller guy. You're biased towards the underdog. So you sort of, whatever the underdog does has a bigger impact in your mind. And sometimes that can bias as the fight goes along. But yeah, super, super close fight. I would really love them to have a rematch. But obviously that's going to hold up both divisions. So I don't know if they'll be able to do it.
Do you think they'll do a rematch soon? I mean, that was an epic fight. I was listening to the Fight Companion during
They all thought Volks.
And so they biased strongly the opinion.
Round 2 was the tricky one. Yeah, round 2 is the tricky one.
Anyway, I'd love to see that run it back and do 3. Actually, there's an epic fight. What was the brief conversation you had with Islam Makhachev and his team?
I didn't know how he'd take the joke because obviously Khabib tried to flying eagle kick Dylan Dennis in the face, so I wasn't sure how my humor would go.
Yep.
But I mean, Dylan must have said some worse things to me. I was just playing around. I mean, you can't really take anything I say serious.
Yeah.
Come across like an idiot. But so when he was coming up to me afterwards, I was like, oh, I don't know what he's going to say. And again, maybe he would have been more upset if he had lost, but he just received the judge's decision.
Yeah.
But he came up, I went to shake his hand, he gave me a big hug and then pretended to throw me. And then I thought the interaction was over and then he circled back. So that's why it was so awkward. I was like, oh, he's coming back. He wants to say, he wants something else. But he just said, why didn't you teach your boy how to escape the body triangle?
Oh, wow. Interesting. What did you say to that?
I said, well, I mean, obviously you've got to learn how to finish a rear naked choke.
Is that what you said?
No, I didn't say No, I was laughing. But then they ushered us out. They were like, get out of here before the Aussie crowd attacks you, you know?
What do you think about the body triangle position they were in? It seemed like for the first time, it seems almost like Volk was
he did
dominant in that position, which is kind of weird.
I mean, damage is meant to trump control. MMA judging. Damage is the number one factor.
Do you think the judges saw that? What did they score that as?
I think they all scored 4 towards Islam.
Yeah.
3 and 5. 2 of the judges scored towards Volks. One of the judges scored 3 for Islam. It was 49-46 for one of them, and the other ones were 48-47. I think the confusing round was round 2. I don't think anyone scored the body triangle round for Volks, which I wish they had.
Volkanovski was and is still arguably pound for pound greatest fighter in the world. How long have you known him?
I don't know the first time. I met him before he was in the UFC. When I used to live in Melbourne, he came down to train at Absolute.
Yeah.
And then we really connected on Ultimate Fighter. One of his guys he was going to bring to Ultimate Fighter, Brad Riddell, pulled out last second. So he called me when I was in Puerto Rico and he's like, do you want to coach on Tough for 5 weeks? And like I said, Puerto Rico was apocalypse now. I was like, yeah, get me out of here. So I jumped on that opportunity and we were in Vegas 5 weeks together. Because he was meant to fight Ortega and then he got hit with COVID real bad. Got stuck I think he was in hospital for maybe 1 to 2 weeks. And then before he flew back to Australia, they were like, all right, maybe we just do you guys as the Ultimate Fighter coaches. So I jumped on board with that. And that's really when we've become close.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was useful in the Ortega fight, helped him get out of submissions. He fought then Korean Zombie Max Holloway. I basically just held the bucket at that point in the corner, a couple striking fights. And then again, we had to tackle the Islam problem. So I did spend 5 to 6 weeks down there preparing for that.
How did you tackle the Islam problem?
How did I take?
Was you, somebody who barely knows anything about wrestling, having to
Obviously, it doesn't take much,
Yeah.
Especially Russian wrestling.
Did the beard help, or like what? Like, in all seriousness, what were some of the key ideas that you worked on with Volkanovski to prepare for it?
I had the help of Frank Hickman. Hickman was down there too, one of the Hickman brothers' wrestling coach. So we were sort of like problem solving. And I mean, basically, we were confident in Volk's fence wrestling, his cage work. He's super good on the cage, super like under-respected in that position. And we knew that if you were able to take the scrambles to the cage, he would be effective against Islam. Because again, Islam is background in Sambo freestyle wrestling, but I mean, honestly, he's probably got the same experience on the cage as Volks. Obviously, some of those wrestling skills will translate very well to the cage, but the cage is still somewhat of a gray area, an equalizer. And Volks, again, incredible ability to stand up, incredible defense on the cage, which you saw. We worked on strategies to get up and a ton of submission defense. Islam loves Kimuras, obviously rear naked from the back, arm bars. Those are sort of, and arm triangles, dominant submissions. But again, the guys he submitted, not grapplers. Apart from Charles Oliveira. And again, Charles Oliveira was basically knocked out at that point. So it was still impressive he submitted him. But again, I always told people this. They thought it was crazy. I was like, Charles Oliveira versus Islam in a grappling match. Oliveira is going to win that match.
Like submission grappling.
Submission grappling, yeah. So in a pure grappling skill set, I think Oliveira is a more dangerous grappler. So we didn't even come into it thinking Islam was this unstoppable boogeyman that people make him out to be. So we approached it from that, just focused on the techniques, ability to get back up, using turtle to get back up, using turtle to scoot to the cage to get back up, and hand fighting from there, keeping it pretty safe. But what makes Volk so special, I think, is his gas tank and his willpower. He's just unbreakable. Yeah. The Dagestani guys, Khabib, Islam, they are good at submissions, but they break guys mentally and they fatigue him. And then they take the submission that's offered. Oliveira is a guy that can jump on submissions and have an incredible technical ability to finish those submissions, whether you're fresh or you're tired. And then you combine that with Volkanovski, who incredible willpower, never gets tired. You're never going to break him. And as you saw, he only attempted one submission the whole fight.
Is that learned? Is that trained? Or are you just born with that mental toughness?
It's a good question. I mean, he's like an anomaly. Like the entire fight camp, not nervous at all. Supremely confident. The whole fight week, completely confident. He just has an attitude like, oh, everyone cast me out, we will see. You know what I mean? Islam, he's like, let's see.
No doubt.
No doubt at all. Super relaxed. Up until about 5 minutes before, and then he starts to amp himself up. He's like, you are not taking this belt from my family. He gets into that sort of mindset.
He actually says that out loud?
You can't teach that survival. He didn't even take a fight, you know?
Have you guys ever been like pushed to the limit like that or broken in a grappling match?
I'll do it in practice. Like I'll push myself to like, I think I might pass out or die or something. Like as far as like how tired you get, because like in a match,
you try not to ever get close to that in a match.
Yeah, you try to, because it's important to understand where your exhaustion point is. But yeah, if you have to push to that limit in a match, you're probably doing something wrong. Like if you see in matches where guys sprint the last like minute, they try to win the match in the last minute, and it's like you definitely had some mistakes leading up to that. If you have to, kind of go balls to the wall.
Okay, but has there been ever times in competition, especially like early on, because you wrestled pretty hard, and wrestling is pretty exhausting. Like not wrestling, but wrestling style kind of thing, going against the best people in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. Again, I think in practice it's important to do that hard work. That where competition is much easier. I think if you redline in practice and you really push to like death's door, then once you're in competition and you're working with, you're being fresh in a comp, I mean, it's much better.
Have you ever been to that thing where Dan Gable talks about always wanting to be to a place where you can't get off the mat? Like you work so hard in the training room, you can't get off the mat. And I think he says he's failed at that in his career. He was always able to at least crawl off the mat.
Yeah, I definitely never like actually died on the mat, but I felt like I was gonna die,
Sure. What about you? Do you quit all the time?
I get a light cramp. I'm like, you know what? You got me, Mo. Let's do this again tomorrow. That's it.
Dude, if I'm asking Craig for a roll, he's in the bathroom somewhere.
Do you see the value of pushing yourself like to that place where you're knocking on death's door?
Yeah, but within safety, because obviously the most serious injuries occur when you're tired, overtraining and stuff like that. So I think like taking a page out of what those MMA fighters do, especially Volks with his training, like he's not necessarily pushing crazy in each round, but he's doing extra conditioning, assault bike stuff, crazy workouts outside. And he does do some crazy training workouts, but all safe, very safe. Like when he's redlining like that in the training room, it's a very controlled, safe setting. I think to do that in jiu-jitsu against some of these lunatics out there that are trying to kill you, especially when you have a name, can be dangerous.
So your approach to jiu-jitsu is don't warm up and don't try too hard.
No surgery
for safety. No, for safety though.
Yeah, longevity,
And talk shit about Russians. I got it. I hear you. Oh, you mentioned cage work. What's interesting to you that you've learned over all this time about cage work? What's interesting about the dynamics of that? Are you talking about both like the control in the dominant position, but also getting up from the bottom while you're against the cage? All of that. The
added dimension of that cage, that wall being there, changes a lot of stuff, right? So obviously, in some ways, it's a much lower impact wrestling style because you can't be sprawled on. You can shoot, the cage is going to block their feet, you're going to be able to chase down their hips. It's just a completely different fight. And again, because of Islam's judo skills, that upper body controls you see he's able to use against the cage, like the inside trips, sort of the Uchimata style, Harai Goshi throws. So obviously those skills do translate, but yeah, I think the cage is a great equalizer for a lot of things like athleticism and stuff. It takes away a huge speed advantage aspect of the fight.
So he's really good at standing up. What is there? I assume he learned all of that from you and your instructional just stand up.
I mean, we were so confident. I was like, you know what? Work. Why don't we put this thing out a month before the fight?
Yeah.
Maybe the illegal download hasn't made its way to Russia yet.
Yeah.
But it was there for him.
Can you explain to me what's in the instructional just stand up? Like what are the ideas?
I mean, the old school way to stand up, people talk about the technical get up, the old Gracie, put the hand, but I mean, that doesn't work. It hasn't worked for 20 years, If you look at everyone that gets up in MMA, they're using turtle to get up. They're using wrestling to get up. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is counter to what pure jiu-jitsu says. They say, don't expose the back. Don't ever expose your back. I think jiu-jitsu is a terrible way to get back to the feet because if you were to retain guard and go half guard or closed guard, super hard positions to get up. You're basically putting yourself in a leg tuck for wrestling. So I think you need to borrow from wrestling to learn how to get up in an MMA fight. So basically how to safely expose your own back while not allowing them to get hooks and use that to get back up, or at least not allow them to get two hooks.
And that applies for MMA especially?
For MMA especially, because obviously striking is a factor, but if they are striking, they don't have locked hands around your body, means you are able to move. You are able to make an attempt to get back up. They have to choose between control, submission, or strikes.
Post from Reddit. Why does Craig Jones push so hard for a bottom is bad jiu-jitsu? What is so bad about playing bottom guard, such as half guard or De La Riva? Those are the two options.
No one likes the bottom.
Why would I want to get up? It's the question for all of you. Is the bottom a bad place to be?
I mean, the bottom's bad if you don't want that guy on top of you. That's the way I look at it,
Okay, that sounds like something a cowboy would say, but I don't know if that has much meaning. I think the point of jiu-jitsu is both are dangerous, being on bottom and on top.
I think the longer the match is, probably favors the top guy more, just because every movement the bottom guy makes is probably carrying your weight, carrying that gravity on top of you. So I think it's a bit more efficient passing from the top as opposed to sweeping from bottom.
Bottom's reactive. Top is active. The top player decides how to engage, how to approach the guard. They can use angles, they can use footwork, they can throw people, throw the legs by. So it's an active position. Bottom's reactive. Reactive, you're going to get fatigued.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to gas somebody out while playing guard, but I think it's very easy to gas somebody out when attempting to pass it.
Well, you guys are talking about gassing people out, but is there more dangers from the bottom, like in terms of submissions and all that kind of stuff, or no?
I'm back and forth because I'm a top player, but I understand the value of being on bottom. Like when I do play guard, bottom, I feel like the submissions come much easier, and when I'm on top, they come also pretty easy, but maybe I just take a different route.
top two cowboys talking about jitsu.
Top on the streets, bottom in the sheets. That's
Nicky. What was the hardest part of the training for the training camp for Volkanovski? Like you're just experiencing world-class MMA fighters training and given your approach to jiu-jitsu of not trying too hard and no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, there's a lot of pressure for that. You know, like that's a lot of pressure for me to go in and think that I could possibly figure out a way to help this guy address this guy that's basically never been beaten. I think he got knocked out once, but basically not really even been put in bad positions. You know what I mean? So that's a lot of pressure on me, especially because Volkanovski's such a great guy.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu's different, you know, like you coach a guy, he loses, he has time to tap. But in MMA, you could get severely hurt.
Yeah.
There's a lot more weight in what you need to do as a coach. You have a greater sense of responsibility to their health and well-being. You know, like obviously I know Volk's kids, I know his wife, you know what I mean? They're putting faith in you to not just win the fight, but keep this man safe, you know? So from my perspective, a hell of a lot more pressure coaching him as an MMA fighter.
So almost like the psychological aspect of like, of doing the best you can for him.
Exactly. Yep.
What was hardest about the actual training? Was it the technical aspect of trying to figure out the puzzle of Islam, or was it like being a good training partner in figuring out how the grappling would work? Basically, playing your best impression of Makhachev. Were you trying to actually impersonate him, like not just visually, but like in style?
Yeah, definitely visually.
You're not as good looking, but go ahead.
A little taller, but
right.
No, in terms of the training, yeah, I mean, Islam's known as an incredibly strong guy, so obviously I'm heavier than Islam, so theoretically I should be able to replicate that strength difference. And then in terms of grappling, targeting those submissions that Islam does, like focusing on those in the training room, focusing on the way he holds half guard, and really in the grappling sense, trying to replicate him on the ground. And then, yeah, I wrestled with him on the wall a ton, trying to replicate, obviously, to the best of my ability, a lot of the stuff he does on the wall. Body lock heavy, inside trip, uchimatas, and just constantly putting the work on Volks, you know what I mean? Like constantly chaining attacks against him. Really replicate
as
that.
He's trying to get up and escape and all that kind of stuff. So this submissions, like both judo and submissions, just attacking.
Exactly. And there's only so much you can do really, because obviously he's been fighting a long time. So it's like you're trying to polish what he already is good at. You can't just completely create an entirely new game for him in the space of 6 weeks. So you're trying to take what he's already effective at, add to it. And luckily a lot of the stuff he's already very good at was easy to add to for the fight.